We're almost out of time. Our next pay-per-view event is in 1 month. On March 19th, it's WCW Uncensored. Mispronouncing the name of the upcoming pay-per-view event is the perfect way to cap off this goddamn slopfest. Let's get to it. I'm John Renton with the Retro Review of WCW Superbrawl 5 If Man, Woman, Animal, Vegetable, Mineral are still alive. Goodness me, 1995 was a messy year for wrestling. WCW got some things right. Nitro launched a little bit later in the year, quite a bit later in the year after this pay-per-view. And there were some good things, like some good undercards, but none of that could be found here. The crowd did pop for the last two matches, and for a few of the stars, but goodness goddamn me, this pay-per-view has aged like milk. So anyway, Baltimore, Maryland, about 13,400 fans, and pretty close to a sellout there. The crowd, you know, as far as like being passionate wrestling fans, Baltimore is a hell of a goddamn wrestling city, going back to the Great American Bashes and various other wrestling shows before and since this. The world title is on the line in the Superbrawl for it all. Who came up with the taglines for these WCW pay-per-views? Like, seriously, who the hell came up with these? Because a lot of them didn't make any grammatical sense. So, this show is snakebit just as far as either towns seemingly going into business for themselves, getting the boo-boo face because they had to put some people over, or just overall messy finishes where some matches either went too long and then the finishes came out of nowhere. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with letting some programs, you know, go and let the talents tell the story in the ring, but goodness me, there were some matches where it's like they were just doing shit after a while because they probably should have put another match on. They probably should have had one of the main event matches, as it were, be on the pay-per-view to fill a little more time. Now, the pre-show matches, by the way, or the main event matches that they taped before the show, and they were broadcasting, I believe, on WCW. Well, they said main event, but I mean, I'm trying to remember if it was just Saturday night that they had it for. Paul Orndorff defeated Brad Armstrong in about 4 minutes, and there was a Stars and Stripes versus Romeo Valentino and Dino Casanova tag match. Stars and Stripes, by the way, Marcus Alexander Bagwell, well, before he was Buff Bagwell, and the Patriot. It lasted for all of 70 seconds before Vader did a run-in after shoving down Eric Bischoff because he was just sick of everyone's shit, apparently, and then beat the shit out of everybody. And that's fine. Vader beating up people always got a big pop because Vader is Vader, and he was tremendous for a number of years. Rest in peace, Vader. Should have been put in the WWE Hall of Fame before he passed away. And Arn Anderson beat Johnny B. Bad in a lumberjack match for the TV championship. Johnny B. Bad had a lot of got a lot of run with the TV championship as far as like title shots and everything. And Mark Merrow actually wasn't all that bad. I really think that he just got the stigma of just being a Little Richard impersonator when he really wasn't that bad. Those mid-90 graphics, the pre-tape with Hogan and Vader doing their promos and everything. It's Vader time. Somebody's going to try to gift that. Anyway, yeah, like I have enough fans that have. If you want to gift that, have fun. Send it to me on Twitter. Anyway, Shivani, Heenan, and Mean Gene welcome us. Shivani and Heenan call the action. Mean Gene says that he'll talk to Ric Flair, who, by the way, was retired. This was just a few months after Halloween Havoc 94, where they had the title versus career cage match where Mr. T was handcuffed to the corner and Flair got counted down, but Sherry got pantsed because, of course, she did, because Sherry was all about business. And then Brother Brudai became the Butcher, and we went with Brutus Beefcake in a Starrcade main event against Hulk Hogan. If that was an indication of how WCW's fortunes weren't exactly going to turn around, I don't know what was. Now, that's not to say that it was all Hogan's fault, but about 99.9% of it was Hogan's fault. So there's footage of a limo. It's Vader time, but Flair's in there too. Flair's retired, but Flair's still allowed to appear on television, just not in a wrestling capacity. By the way, apparently, according to interviews, Flair was supposed to be off for about a year, or at least a number of months, like maybe till the summer. And he was brought back pretty quickly because the whole thing with the Butcher didn't work out. Other people apparently didn't want to do business with Hogan or whatever it was, and Flair was brought back within a couple months. I mean, I get it. Like, you know, Flair is Flair, and WCW fans loved him, but still. So, At one point during this whole thing with the limo, Vader smashed a limo window. That's how you smash a limo window, Goldberg. Vader, yeah. We then see footage of Vader interrupting the tag team match that I mentioned before. And then we get Alex Wright. I can't do the goddamn dance at all. One, I don't have the dancing music. And I also am not as talented as Das Wunderkid. So who took on Pretty Paul Roma, who is one half of Pretty Wonderful. Pretty Wonderful was a pretty goddamn good tag team, and Roma is a good worker. Roma being named the worst Four Horsemen member of all time, that's unfair. He didn't fit in the group, he admits that, but good grief. Good grief. As far as looks, it worked. He just had a whole different lifestyle and did different stuff, and this has been talked about in interviews, but I think Roma gets a bad rap. That being said, I totally see why WCW Brass decided to can him shortly after this and say, that's it, you're done. You're being released from your contract because, whew, this is not a great way to start the goddamn show. Now, Alex Wright was too young to be pushed. Way too young. He had an undefeated streak for a while. A good while. And Roma basically just didn't want to put him over. You could see it. You could see it with how he... And I'm not saying being a heel. You could just see it in the ring. He didn't exactly have the best look once Alex Wright, was doing his stuff. And again, Alex Wright would get better, but he was just brought in and pushed so soon. He won his first pay-per-view match, which was against John Paul Levesque. And I wonder what the hell ever happened to that guy. I mean, I guess he had to go play a game elsewhere. Of course I kid, it's Triple H. I mean, in his only WCW pay-per-view match, and he lost to Alex fucking Wright, but nevertheless, Orndorff shows up later. The crowd was into this, and they liked Alex Wright. And Roma hit a hell of a goddamn sky elbow. My goodness, that was an insane elbow that he hit. But yeah, Roma was visibly pissed having to put Alex Wright over here. Roma basically he was getting more and more upset. Him and Alex Wright. This match went a little bit longer probably than it needed to. But then we get a bump, where Roma ends up smashing into Alex Wright. And then we get a roll-up, but Roma tries kicking out at 2.5. The referee counts it anyway. And that was one of many, that and just kicking out before the finish, and also just, in general, I guess an attitude problem, according to WCW Brass. I don't know the actual reason. They felt the need to fire him. They put up with a whole bunch of other stuff, but from other people. But then decided, Roma, he's not worth it. Even though I think Roma could have contributed to the company at least for another year. Or at least until Paul Orndorff had to retire later in 95. The Pretty Wonderful was a hell of a goddamn team. That being said, this was notorious for being a match that's like, it kind of lives in infamy. It will live forever in infamy. So anyway, Mean Gene interviews Harlem Heat, and Sherry, my goodness, Sherry, fucking hell, sensational. Sherry was gorgeous. Good Lord. She lended so much credibility to Harlem Heat. Booker T, Stevie Ray, who were a hell of a team. They were a hell of a team before Sherry came along. But she added instant credibility because of her career before. AWA, WWE, and just being great. They will destroy the Nasty Boys. Bunkhouse Buck, who by the way was Jimmy Golden, who had debuted in 1969 by this point. Or he debuted in 1969, so he was 25 years into his career almost. Depending on what time of 1969 he started in. And the whole point is that he was in his mid-40s. I want to say he was about 44, 45 here. And he had Colonel Rob Parker in his corner, and Ming, who was Haku, Ming, who decided to go to WCW and became Ming. And Ming went where he wanted. And are you going to tell him no? I'm not. I choose life. Bunkhouse Buck took on Jim Duggan, and this was not a technical masterpiece, nor should it have been expected to be. This should have gone 6 minutes. This went about 12. While it wasn't bad, it wasn't great. It kind of got a little bit messy. And then Parker got knocked down, and the 3-point stance, 1, 2, 3. And then Ming hit him with a kick, hit Duggan with a kick, and then hit him with a nerve hold. Him, too many pronouns, pal. And got a nerve hold on Duggan, and officials were trying to come out, please stop, Ming, stop. Mean Gene then interviews the Nasty Boys. Loud noises. And they also said they were going to beat up Sherry. Abuse. That's always good. Kevin Sullivan with the Butcher versus Dave Sullivan. Speaking of abuse, this was an abuse on the fans watching, the fans ordering the pay-per-view, the cameraman, everybody watching this. Kevin Sullivan's work was always rotten. He was great on promos. Great at being dark, mysterious character. But goodness goddamn me, he couldn't cut. He couldn't cut in the goddamn ring. He was not good at all. This was horrendous. The Butcher ends up distracting at one point. Sullivan runs Sullivan. Too many Sullivans in this match, pal. Kevin runs Dave's head into Butcher's head, and of course Butcher, beefcake, because of the parasailing accident, had all those metal plates. The fact that he was still somehow able to, the fact that he was able to continue his life after that is saying something. But we get a roll-up. 1, 2, 3. That's the second roll-up finish of the goddamn night. Yeah, Sullivan versus Sullivan was terrible. This is months before Sullivan and the Yeti. Mean Gene interviews Avalanche and Big Bubba. So many WWF flashbacks. Harlem Heat with Sherry versus the Nasty Boys. The Nasty Boys WCW theme was certainly interesting because it was just them screaming, "We're the boys, we're the Nasty Boys." Why I sound like Nappa from Dragon Ball Z Abridged, I don't know. Okay, the crowd was into this. The Nasty Boys' faces, that was just weird to me. They always screamed heel. They took out Booker's leg, and then Shivani had mentioned that, and then Heenan said a little bit later, it looks like they're trying to take out Booker's leg. And he's like, I believe I just said that. That's where I heard it, because Heenan, even at half speed, didn't give a goddamn shit. He was leagues better than any announcer they had. I'm not even knocking Tanay. I'm not even knocking Shivani. It's just Heenan was just so goddamn great. Sherry trash talks. Eventually we get a hot tag to Knobs. We get a melee. Sherry accidentally hits Stevie with her shoe. And during all this, one of the Harlem Heat members gets tossed over the top rope. So that was Booker, actually, because Stevie Ray's the one that got hit. And roll up for 3. But then a second ref comes in because we get another ref. And oh no, the titles get brought back to Harlem Heat. And the crowd boos. Dusty finish. Anyway, Mean Gene interviews Sting while Savage just marches around and everything. Not talking! And then recaps of Dustin and the Blacktop Bully, who is Barry Darsow, yes. Crusher Khrushchev, Demolition Smash, and of course, Repo Man. And then later, Hole-in-One Barry Darsow. They gave Barry Darsow a golf gimmick. I'm not kidding. Look that shit up if you don't believe me. It was terrible. Not that Darsow's terrible. Actually, Darsow was quite good. It was a horrendous gimmick. Anyway, Bully spent time in jail because of, I don't know, assault or something. I don't know what the hell they were doing here. WCW was in a weird flux. Because they still had the cartoonish stuff, and they were trying to get a little bit less comical. They were trying to be more like Vince. But 95, the occupation gimmicks and stuff like that. By 94, those were old, and Vince really ramped them up in 95 and even 96. The Goon and T.L. Hopper and all that stuff, and Freddie Joe Floyd. Poor Tracy Smothers. Tracy Smothers was not out next. That was Nick Bockwinkel. He was the WCW commissioner and said, Ming, leave. And Ming was like, all right. Yeah, why the hell not? I mean, Bockwinkel, even in his prime against Ming, I would have had to have gone with Ming. But, of course, for storyline, WCW commissioner, he rules all. Dustin Rhodes versus the Blacktop Bully with Rob Parker in the corner. Okay, what a feud this was. By the way, next month they would have the Uncensored 95 match. The King of the Road match. I retro-reviewed that 3 years ago, I think. So, yeah, if you want to go back and watch some old videos, you can. That hasn't gone anywhere, and I just had some fun reviewing that, and well, at least Dustin was motivated here, and it was still pretty good. This would also be one of the last pay-per-view matches he would have. Actually, him and Blacktop Bully would be fired right after the King of the Road match because of the blading, and you can't have blood on pay-per-view, apparently for some reason, according to Turner Broadcasting. And then Dustin would go be Goldust for a number of years. Of course, at one point, his jacket gets pulled over his head, and Blacktop Bully's choking him, and Heenan says the iconic line, you live by the jacket, you get choked by the jacket. Because even at half speed, Heenan could just outwit anybody with his commentary. We get some arm focus. Bully takes over. We get Sleeper City. And then later, Dustin brings Parker into the ring with a suplex. Colonel Rob Parker, former wrestler, but he had a bad back and decided to, retire. And Robert Welch, don't necessarily blame him one bit. I mean, in his mid-40s, he was even though he was pretty good and could take some bumps, he wanted to have less abuse on his body. And then they do another outside in. As Parker gets back up, he traps Dustin's foot. 1, 2, 3. After Bully falls on top of him, just like the finish they did at WrestleMania 5 with Warrior and Rude. And a finish they've done so many goddamn times in the territory days. Good stuff. For what it was. I mean, it did go a little bit too long. 16 minutes. This could have been 12. But Mean Gene interviews Vader. He yells, "It's time, it's time, it's Vader's scissoring time." It's like that scene from Blue is the Warmest Color. You know which one I'm talking about. 7-minute long scene. It was great. The director isn't. Fuck the director of Blue is the Warmest Color. How dare you be a creep? Anyway, Heenan says Hogan is scared while the crowd says, "We want Flair, we want Flair." Mean Gene brings out Flair, who had retired months before, and he'll sit front row just to observe. From Mount Everest, Washington, Avalanche. I love Gary Michael Capetta, but they gave him some really, really cheesy shit to say. Yes, John Tenta, Earthquake, and then Avalanche, and then that was too close, so they had to call him the Shark. I don't think WCW Creative knew what the fuck they were doing. Sting gets a pop, lots of pyro, same with Savage, and this is Savage's WCW pay-per-view debut because he had shown up just weeks before Starrcade 94, and because they didn't run a pay-per-view every single month at that point, they didn't have one in January, and this is February that they decided to have that, February 95. Savage and Sting against Avalanche and Big Bubba. 3 out of the 4 people in this match are dead, and I am sad. 2 didn't even make it out of the mid-2000s. I believe Big Bubba and Tenta both died in 04. Or thereabout, I believe. Actually, Bubba might have died in 03. I'm trying to remember exactly. I mean, I don't remember the exact years, but I remember being very sad. And Savage, of course. Rest in peace, Randy Savage, 2011. Always better than Hulk Hogan. Love me some Randy Savage. This was a good match for what it was, at least as far as star power and people that the fans remembered. Because there were crossover fans as far as WWF, WCW. Big superplex to a pop. The crowd was into this. Match was a standard fare, but it wasn't dull. I'll give them that. Then Flair taunts Savage at one point, and Savage is trying to get at Flair in the crowd. That's a future feud where Angelo Poffo would become involved, and they would do the lifeguard match, the lumberjack match at Bash at the Beach 95. And Heenan went another iconic line about Angelo Poffo, who was there in the crowd. You know, he's been here all day. His cane's been stuck in the sand. He's been going in a circle. Rest in peace, Angelo. God damn it. God, I love Heenan. Miss Heenan so much. Sky Elbow, but Avalanche was legal participant. So a Sky Elbow on Bubba. And then Sting dives on Avalanche, like with a diving clothesline. Lands right on Bubba, almost on his head. As stout as Bubba is, that would have been bad. 1, 2, 3. Big pop. And there you go. It was certainly not a great match, but as far as pace, they kept the pace up. And it was only about 10.5 minutes. And then Heenan and Schiavone killed time and banter. And Heenan just outwitting Schiavone. And Schiavone, I like Schiavone. I think Schiavone gets a bad rap, but Heenan just beating him pillar to post with the banter. Video package on Vader versus Hogan. Mean Gene interviews Hogan and Jimmy Hart. Hogan proceeds to say brother about 20 million times in a 3-minute pre-tape. And 3 minutes might even be generous. I think this might have been 2.5. Vader entrance. Hogan gets some cheers, but he's also getting some boos. The fans are getting tired of him. In Baltimore, a notoriously smart crowd. A crowd that is very vocal, that will let you know how they feel. And Michael Buffer's intros took 14 years because he was slurring every goddamn word. I'm sorry, but that let's get ready to raw. Yeah, well, I mean, that's pretty much the only thing. I can't say that because it's trademarked and I would get in trouble. But guy isn't exactly great. Bruce Buffer is better. Vader versus Hogan with Jimmy Hart, WCW title match. Look, I appreciate what they were trying to do. Vader looking like a beast and beating out Hogan. Hogan, he's too strong. But this wasn't good because Vader never seemed like he could be Hogan's equal. I'm sorry. There was no point where anybody thought Vader was going to win this. The crowd did love Vader. They popped for some stuff that Hogan did, but that was mostly the young fans. A lot of the older fans were getting tired of Hogan. And Hogan at one point later in the match just hits Vader with a chair a couple times. No DQ? No DQ. Even though the title couldn't change hands on a DQ, there's no DQ. Nope. We'll just keep going. Hogan starts no-selling, gets some boos. They tried to hide it, but they couldn't. One leg drop at just a 1 count, ref bump, and then a power bomb and no ref, and then Flair suddenly runs in and starts beating him down. And then tosses the ref. The referee doesn't DQ Hogan or DQ Vader. Hogan rises up again. Flair attacks Hogan. Then we get a DQ. They had no idea what the hell they were doing. Savage and Sting run down to stop this beatdown. Pyro and such. And our next pay-per-view is in 1 month, March 19th. WCW Uncensored. Yeah. Superbrawl 5 was certainly a show that happened. It was a mess. It was a fairly hot crowd at times, but a good indicator of what was going to happen with WCW as long as they kept relying on Hogan. And eventually it became clear that with Nitro that the fans were going to start booing Hogan more and more. Anyway, agree, disagree with what I said, like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Retlin. I'll see you soon.